6:30.
Breaking tonight in the Adam Price double murder case, the judge sent the jury home with instructions to pack an overnight bag for tomorrow, just in case deliberations last late into the evening.
Closing arguments are set for tomorrow. Today, the defense called several more witnesses to try to create reasonable doubt when it comes to the evidence. Our Brian Mastery is live with the latest.
Jacqueline, John, the defense rested its case this afternoon. Adam Price did not testify. Of course, he's not required to do so, and the jury will be instructed not to read anything into his decision to stay silent. The big question mark today was whether Adam Price would even show up for court. There he is. He did. This is him walking into the courtroom early this morning. Remember, yesterday, Judge George Thompson sent the jury home early after Adam Price had an undisclosed medical issue in the middle of his team questioning a witness. From my view, he looked and walked like he usually does when I've seen him in court beginning last Tuesday. He was also participating with his team during jury instructions. The defense asked a number of key witnesses today why they were asked to test items more than 2 years after they were collected and why other items didn't get more testing, such as the clothing Emily and Teddy Price were wearing when they were found dead in their beds in their father's Bellevue home. Remember, Adam Price was arrested later that day in 2021 in California after a priest called the police after talking with him. The state argued that the investigation changed into possible suspects, and just what type of evidence they would test once they heard that what Price had to say and that he was under arrest. The medical examiner ruled the children were smothered to death. The defense tried to hammer home the point that people smelled an odor in that home and that the unknown odor could have been the killer. The coroner did rule out carbon monoxide and cyanide. Late this afternoon, both sides made some objections to the jury instructions. In a couple of instances, the judge will rule tomorrow on those. The defense wanted to have manslaughter be an option for the jury. Remember, Adam Price is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Both sides are expected to take about an hour for the closing arguments, Jacqueline and John. The jury will likely get the case for deliberations before lunch. Now, if they don't have a verdict by late tomorrow, they'll spend the night together at a hotel instead of going home. On your side, Brian Mastery, 6 News.